to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast with Borg, Betz, and a baller.
Welcome in. It's Wednesday, August 28th. We're back. Fantasy Footballers Dynasty podcast. I'm your host, Kyle Borganoni, and I'm joined by Matthew Betz and Jason Moore.
Back, baby. I feel like I haven't talked to... Well, I talked to Kyle last week, but not really. I mean, Kyle was a shell of himself on the show last week.
Yeah, and now I'm a shell of my voice.
Exactly, and I haven't talked to you in a month, Jason.
It has been a while. You went and had more children.
Just one.
And well, right, but now you've got more children total, right?
Sure do.
I mean, that's still true. Yeah, so it's neat. We had our live show this last week, which is why my voice is gone. And but it's nice to have you back, man. You were sorely missed.
I missed you guys. I did listen into all the shows, so I felt like I was part of it from afar. But changing diapers, listening to the show, inserting a joke here or there, laughing at myself. No one cared. My wife didn't care. But yeah, I missed you guys.
It is funny. We're at this point a week out, and I feel like we are just body, soul, and minds kind of stumbling to the very end. I mean, Jason's talking right now. I was sick last week. Betz just returned, but we do have a pretty good show for you guys. Like I think all of the things we've been building on throughout the offseason come to a culmination here. So we're going to give a couple of our bold predictions. Jason, you did this at the live show. We're going to do a Dynasty edition, so we're going to change it up a little bit. But just for those that haven't listened to the live show, make sure you do that. Jason, I feel like you were able to pull out all the stops for the people. If they haven't watched it yet on YouTube, they need to.
Yeah, that was it was a lot of fun. Thank you to everybody that came out. And thank you to Dennis Allen primarily for being the heel of the 2024 NFL season.
Jason, I'm not sure if you're aware of this, and I can't, for some reason in Pennsylvania where I am, you can't actually wager on this, but you can wager on the first head coach to be fired in the NFL, just so you're aware. And if you wanted to, maybe throw a couple bucks on that.
My bold prediction that he was going to be the first one fired was mostly out of vitriol, and their schedule does suck. But you also watch how the organization speaks about him and why they didn't fire him, and I go, oh man, they're just gonna hold on to him. But we'll see. I mean, he's going to do a bad job of that, I am sure.
Yeah, I circled, week 7 when they play the Broncos, which is just great poetry. Like the NFL, great job at that point where you know that Peyton's going to stick it to him. Like you understand.
Yeah, for sure. This is the long con. This is the long play of why Peyton made sure he got the head coaching gig. He's like, because I'm going to come back someday. I want to play against them.
Yeah, the Saints. I remember last year I had a conversation with both of you guys where I was like, hey, their schedule's so good. I'm telling you guys, down the stretch, this team is going to beat their win total. Take it to the bank. They did not. They did not follow through with any things that they were gifted. And if you go back through their game logs, it's like so many one-score games they just blew. Their turnover margin was terrible. So I'm sure the Saints won't do that to us this year. Derek Carr, no chance that Derek Carr makes Chris Olave managers pay at all. Jason, you traded for Chris Olave.
I did.
And
I drafted him again today. No, I do think that Chris Olave, there's this tier right now in fantasy. If you're doing your drafts right now, I'm sure you are. There is the second tier, not necessarily like specifically tier 2, but of wide receivers where it's like you have to decide between Chris Olave and Drake London and Devontae Adams and Marvin Harrison Jr. And there's this whole group of guys that honestly they're all about the same. I would rather take the last one at value and have a better next pick. But I was the first one to have to pick one of those. I had to have a wide receiver, and I chose Olave over all of them because I do believe that Olave, despite the coaching staff, his talent is there. His quarterback is actually healthy. We don't know that for sure with Kirk Cousins, and he is the only receiving option there.
I want to make sure at the top that we talk to you guys about the Megala Bowl because my draft is coming up. And if you want to compete in the largest fantasy football league in the known universe, you can go to megalabowl.com and participate. Last year we had over 25,000 people. get to be a part of that, and you get you get to put this on your gravestone. I won the Megalo Bowl, and then I get to be in the Listener League the next year. I mean, it's a pretty big honor. I'm drafting with my son this weekend. He said, Dad, can I have a team? And so I made sure that we're going to get to draft together for this.
That's cool.
Which
Which
kid did you pick? Your favorite, or which one?
I picked the one that hopefully will tell me the right thing.
Oh, gotcha.
I know that when it comes to
that's what makes him your favorite.
Yeah.
We'll see how he does in this draft
make sure
afterwards.
You join.
He might not be.
So you can join before the final draft day, which is September 4th. So, I mean, we have drafts going all weekend. This is the last weekend before week 1 kickoff. So you can do that. There's drafts on Saturday, on Sunday, Monday, Tuesday. I mean, you can be a part of those. So go to megalobowl.com if you want to compete, and you might even get to be in a league with me, one with Betz, or Jason.
Yep. I have not yet picked my draft slot, but I will. I'm always in the Megalo Bowl, and I expect to win it this year.
Yeah, and so that's for Foot Clan members if you want to be a part of that, megalobowl.com. Quick question for you guys. Reflecting on the last 6-7 months, long list of episodes we've done for the main show, for Dynasty. I was looking back through our show docs. What is one Dynasty lesson that you have learned this offseason? So a tried and true thing that you said, you know what? I'm really glad that I'm able to reflect and understand this. So Betz, you can hit us first.
Yes. I just realized I saw yours in the doc, Kyle, and I feel like we have the same exact one, which was a mistake. But my biggest takeaway, and I kind of like think this every year, but every offseason there's stuff that reminds you of like, oh yeah, this happens, where nothing is ever as good or as bad as it seems in the moment, especially in the Dynasty trade market. You think about some of the guys that had a tumultuous offseason, like Rachaad Rice. There was a period of time where it was like, if you had Rachaad Rice, the sky was falling, like, this is bad. Then he had the second incident, and this is getting worse. And fast forward 3 months, and it's like, dude, Rachaad Rice might be the best pick in redraft leagues. Like, this is going to be incredible. At the same time, all offseason, Jonathan Brooks, he's going to be cleared for camp. Jonathan Brooks, he's ahead of schedule. This is going to be great. We just got news yesterday, or today rather. Jonathan Brooks is starting on the PUP list. The same thing with like Javonte with the cut rumors. Like, there's so many things that happen in an offseason where you just need to be ready to strike when the news is appropriate, meaning like there was a window to go get Rachaad Rice. Now, of course, there's risk with those sort of things, right? I'm not saying there's not risk. Same thing with Javonte. If people are worried of like, oh man, it could be Pirine that makes this roster and not Javonte. If you saw that, I'll say silly rumor that was floated out there, there's a window to capitalize. So I just think every offseason, we get these situations, just be ready to pounce. And it's all about risk tolerance with some of these things. Some are less risky than others, but just knowing kind of when those opportunities present themselves can really set you up to have an incredible Dynasty team.
Yeah, when those things happen, I think is the lesson to be learned is like, for me, my lesson, my big takeaway is this last year. My takeaway centers around what has happened with Troy Franklin, but he is just the symptom of the disease, which is the NFL draft hype. Oh my goodness, the NFL draft hype is so real, and we know it. We talk about it even before the NFL draft and your rookie drafts. When that season is going on in Dynasty, we talk about how when that week is happening, the value of these rookies is so overinflated, it's absurd. But he is the best example of this of all time. Troy Franklin. I mean, we don't know how his career is going to go, but we know that, historically speaking, he is in an uphill battle. And after he was drafted to the Broncos with his teammate, they traded up early in the 4th round. I was trying to draft him in drafts because I loved his, pre-NFL draft tape. I was offering bananas offers in all my leagues for him, and I couldn't get him. I could not pry Troy Franklin away. And now you fast forward a little while, I feel like I could get Troy Franklin for anything, and I'm not going to give up anything for Troy Franklin because his odds of hitting are so minuscule. But my point is not so much to not go grab those players. It is when someone is really bananas in that week of that NFL draft or that week of your rookie drafts, when someone is going hard in the paint and they really believe in a player, capitalize. Get that value for them. Get a veteran. Don't just trade them for next year's 2 or whatever. Go get someone that is fantasy relevant, because the majority of these middle to second half of your rookie draft picks, they don't pan out. And so if I can use that hype season to acquire an actual flex option, I will do it.
That is a perfect example, because I look back at some of my drafts in the past, and there were players that I was bananas for, the Terrace Marshalls, the Hakeem Butlers, players that dropped in the NFL draft, and yet my priors were, I like this player. And the same thing we thought about Franklin. Like, man, this player was super fun. I looked at the tape from Oregon's like, this dude is faster than everybody.
His production profile was great.
Yeah. I mean, there's so many things. Man zone, like he was great against both. And yet this was the first time I was able to detach and go, I like this player. I drafted him in some leagues. And then I was actually able to move on at some point when there was still hope. And, somebody needed a young wide receiver. They were rebuilding. And that it's so hard to let go. Like, we saw today, Terrace Marshall Jr. cut from the team. And that was a deep wound. But I learned from that because, man, it's so easy just to stay in, especially has any good news come out from Troy Franklin? One piece of good news this whole summer?
Yes.
Oh.
The only piece of news that has been good for Troy Franklin is that Tim Patrick appears like he is going to get cut or traded. And that's not even a pro Troy Franklin take. He's not the reason Tim Patrick is, maybe being moved on here by the Broncos. This is just a good piece of news that affects him, maybe, hopefully.
He moves from wide receiver 8 on the depth chart to wide receiver 7 with that news, so that's good.
Moving on up.
Good is good.
I mean, there was a point in rookie drafts, we go through a couple different phases, before the combine, after the NFL draft. Those are all the releases. Before the combine, he was a first-round rookie pick.
Yeah, he was. I mean, he was a clear-cut first-round rookie pick, and then his combine hurt him a little bit, and then his draft stock plummeted him. But even still, when you talk about the priors and you look at redraft leagues or best ball leagues, like Troy Franklin, if you look at where he's being drafted for production this year, it's like around relevant players. Troy Franklin he might not even make it to the field this season. But I will say, I still think he's good. I mean, he's so fast. But you've got to, I think the biggest piece of advice here is don't hold on to your priors too hard.
All right, I'm going to give one more here, and that's just anticipating swings in value. It's kind of similar to what you were saying, Betz, but there are different phases in the offseason when you look at certain players. There's before the NFL draft, where you look at the depth chart and go, well, they haven't addressed this yet. Then there's after the NFL draft, where you get to see, okay, here's the aftermath, here's what they took or didn't take, and then it's the preseason. And so I just noticed that there's certain players that you have these windows to trade them, and sometimes you can guess wrong. You're going to say, like, oh, I thought this player would benefit, and things do change. It's just how it works. Like Rico Dowdle. Before the NFL draft, you could have traded him away saying, okay, he's the guy. They haven't got anyone yet, and trade him away on that. Then after the NFL draft, they didn't take anybody, and his value goes up. And then in preseason, you could say, well, maybe they bring in somebody, or maybe Zeke ends up being the guy. And right now, I'd say Rico Dowdle's probably the highest value that he's had at any point this offseason, because there is the optimism. Mike tried to hype him up at the live show. By the way, Jason, did you believe any of that stuff that Mike was sharing?
No. That one, it's really truly a matter of what do the Cowboys believe. I do agree with a lot of what Mike was saying in that you want to target these backfields that don't have a highly drafted player, but they do have a really good offense. I mean, someone's going to score points. Someone's going to have rushing touchdowns for this team. And so that all applies to Rico Suave. However, the logical coaching fallacy, which is, well, Dowdle's the better player, so the coaching staff will put him in ahead. That is the fallacy I think we fall victim to a lot, whereas Zeke is a storied member of this franchise. Zeke is a veteran. Zeke is the best friend of Dak Prescott. And so I think it will be very hard to say, okay, Zeke, you are now Dowdle's backup. Maybe they'll do it. Maybe I don't disagree that they should do it. I just don't think they will do it.
Yeah, one of my favorite parts of the Mike argument, and I don't want to spoil it for anybody, but his opening line is, he's only 26 years old. It's like, this guy has done literally nothing in the league, and he's 26 years old, which like it's a different conversation on Rico for redraft. Like, it makes so much sense where the cost is nothing to take him, and maybe he is the guy. But in Dynasty, if we're having a conversation in 5 or 6 months at the end of the season, is anybody going to be surprised when we're like, oh yeah, that guy is zero value again? I certainly wouldn't be. So in Dynasty, it's like next year and beyond, I would be shocked if Rico is anything meaningful for fantasy. This year, could he be like RB23 and be like usable in redraft? Sure. But like capitalize, I think is the take home for me with Rico anyway. But yeah, it was just funny that was the opening line, is like, he's only 26, which like he's basically at the age cliff in like a year and a half at this point, which is so good. But yeah, he's so polarizing for sure.
Yeah, and there's other players that I've kind of assessed on my teams, like Jahan Dotson. You've heard me talk about him before the NFL draft. Oh man, it was such a bad year. He's toast. After the NFL draft, wait a second, they have Jaden Daniels. Things could change. And then, of course, he gets traded. So it's just like this up and down roller coaster that it depends on when you bought in or when you sold. But at the end of the day, I don't think Dotson's it's weird to even talk about wide receiver players as insurance policies, because they just don't really
it doesn't work.
It doesn't work at all. So think about that when you're looking at your players. You have all these different windows. You also have players right now that can gain value over the first 6 to 7 weeks. A lot of running back twos. Teams will be desperate. Betz and I had a trade where he went in, wanted some James Conner, got him for a couple of twos, and I just kind of assessed that's what you had to do. But I've got some other boys that I'm willing to trade. If people are looking, they're only going to gain value if they stay on the field.
I feel like, Kyle, you're talking specifically right now just to our league. You're like, hey, anybody out there listening?
I'm talking to Jason.
I got some boys out there who wants to come get
You can't talk to me, Kyle. I don't listen.
What if the player I'm talking about is David Montgomery?
All right, tell me a little bit more.
See, I feel like that guy's kind of like your sweet spot. You know, the price isn't crazy. You know that you could trade for him if you want to go for one more title.
Yeah, I mean, the Lions' offense is very good, and there's always the built-in upside of an injury to the other player that creates a true superstar.
Yeah. All right, let's jump in. We've got a couple of bold predictions we're going to hit.
Dynasty Bold Predictions.
I went back and looked at our doc from last year, and I will say we had a couple of hits. You know, if you hit 2 out of 6 for the bold predictions, it's pretty good. Like it's not bad when it comes to hit rates, because these are supposed to be bold. These are supposed to be a little bit of a leap of faith. So last year, just to toot my own horn, I said that Devontae Adams and Cooper Kupp will both be outside the top 20 dynasty wide receivers. That was not a fun thing to share, and to say that these two are going to have a down year in value. Mike talked about Stephon Diggs falling down a cliff, and players like Jordan Addison or Zay Flowers or Drake London all passing him in value, when Diggs was kind of seen as a bona fide superstar, and he was in the first half of the season. So was Mike right? Yeah, he was kind of right.
Yeah, I think Mike was definitely right. Just look at startup draft costs. He was objectively right.
There you go. Betz, I will let you start us off first, because I feel like you have some thoughts here about a player that did you wrong and other players that have done you wrong, and you're kind of just piling on the pain that you felt. I mean, that's what hurt people do. They hurt other people. So share away.
Hurt people, Betz.
I don't even know where this is coming from, Kyle, because this is not anything personal. But the truth is that DeAndre Swift is this year's Miles Sanders. That is my bold prediction, is that, entering the season last year, everyone was like, Miles Sanders, man, the Panthers gave him a ton of money. He signed that 4-year deal, which is really like a 2-year deal, but 4 years, $25 million. He's going to catch 50 plus passes. That's all they talked about all offseason, is the pass catching ability of this running back. But he left arguably the best offensive line in football, at least top 5, with an elite rushing quarterback in Jalen Hurts that should help you be really efficient. Fast forward 1 year later, DeAndre Swift, playing on his 3rd team in 3 years, goes from the best offensive line in football, or top 5, playing next to Jalen Hurts. Hey, they gave him the money, 3 years, $24 million. But really, again, they can get out next year if they want to. So with Swift, it's like, I get it. Like the Bears are exciting. Caleb Williams is exciting. I get all those things. But they've been talking about using him in the passing game as like his best feature. And I don't really believe in Shane Waldron, who is going to get 2 tight ends on the field, is going to get, Rome Odunze on the field, is going to get Keenan Allen playing fullback / tight end on the field. Just kidding. And DJ Moore is a superstar. So like, if their plan is to use him in the passing game, you're not creating a good offense. Like you shouldn't be trying to get Swift the ball and take away touches from your 3 stars. The other thing is that I'm not even sure he's the best runner on his own team. When you look at some of the advanced metrics among running backs with 50 plus carries last year, Swift really wasn't good. 37th in rush yards over expectation per attempt, 43rd in broken tackle rate, 43rd in elusive rating. Meanwhile, Khalil Herbert, 16th and 12th in the same metrics. So I just think when push comes to shove, we get to like week 3, week 4, week 5, and Swift keeps missing the spot where he's supposed to run to. And other coaches have been on him about that before. He keeps trying to bounce everything outside. It's like, let's just keep us on schedule here. Let's get the best runner in the game, which is Khalil Herbert in their backfield, and go from there. So Swift to me feels like he's propped up in value based off of the contract. But as we see every year, these running backs that get these contracts, it's not always a guarantee that's going to work out the way we think it is. So I think Swift, there's so many red flags in his profile that this might be your last chance to kind of cash in, that I'm really worried about where he is value-wise next year.
What do you think you could get? Let's say you're not a contender. You have DeAndre Swift on your team. What do you think you can get from him? Could you get a first?
Probably a late first for a contender. Somewhere, if someone thinks that they can go for it and they need a running back to get them over the edge, presumably that team thinks that their pick's going to be the 109 to 112, right? So probably a late first. I think you could get a running back needy team.
What's interesting is that I basically paid no attention to how somebody looks in preseason. It's just one of the parts where I go like, it's such a short stint. I don't know who's on the field. I don't know if it's a starter. So whenever I see somebody like, oh, he looked really good, it's like, I don't really care. Khalil Herbert did catch my eye in watching some Bears, and specifically Caleb Williams, and going, he's still really good. Like he's really good. And last year, he was 3rd among all running backs in yards per carry when 3 wide receivers were on the field. That caught my attention, knowing that's what they're going to be doing if they have these 3 wide receivers. And so I do think Herbert is kind of my part of this bold prediction that I go, put out a feeler. If you want to get a 3rd or something else, like I don't mind taking a shot here if you think the offense is good. Now, nothing more than that. He's in the final year of his deal. But, I mean, it's hard when you look at they paid him first in the off season and free agency and go, that was the first running back. Like that always holds so true to me.
And that was Miles Sanders.
And that was Miles Sanders. And that was like Chase Edmonds and all these other guys that I thought like, okay, this is the dude. So I don't know. I think Swift is probably going to end up where a lot of running backs are. He's going to be fine. He's probably going to be RB22 or something.
He's going to be fine, mostly irrelevant. I don't mind this take. I have not drafted a lot of Swift. We've taken a look at the metrics of like a rookie quarterback. How do they support their wide receivers, or how do they support their running backs? And the truth is, a rookie quarterback who starts more than 10 games, which Caleb Williams, obviously barring injury, will start the whole season. They are able to raise the floor of their running back one. Like their running back one is not going to be the running back 45, but they also do limit the ceiling. So I think that's like Swift is being drafted around where he'll finish, and I don't care about that.
Yep, I think it's a great way to put it.
So from a dynasty perspective, anytime you're going to lose a year on a running back and it's not better next year, that's the time to get out.
No, that's a good way to look at it, though. When you look at the rankings, you're going to see DeAndre Swift slots in dynasty startups a certain spot. But it's like everybody slides. They don't just stay in a certain spot. And so he could finish as an RB2 and then slowly just next year, just like, oh, is this a player in a startup I would take earlier? No way.
Yeah, and that's a lot of times what I'm looking at when I'm drafting any of these players in startups, or when I'm trading for them middle of the season, is just like, will they be drafted higher or lower next season than they were this season? So I'm going to hop in with my next bold prediction, because you talked about, Betz, you don't think Shane Waldron is a good offensive coordinator.
No, I do not.
I do not think he is a good offensive coordinator either. And Neither does this player that I will tell you about after this break. JSN will be a top 15 drafted wide receiver next season. Jackson Smith-Njigba it's been overblown how bad he was. People feel like he had the worst rookie season on the planet. He's not Quentin Johnston. Quentin Johnston had the worst rookie, season on the planet, where now we're not even sure if he's going to be a starter going into year 2. Everything out of camp from Seattle, the coaching staff, they talk about how he moves just different than most guys. That's why he was the first wide receiver drafted last year. And the thing is he was quietly good, but nobody noticed. It wasn't for fantasy football. He did not do great things. But as an NFL player, a rookie season, he was not that bad. He led the Seahawks in third down receptions, receiving yards, and first read targets on third down. He ranked 10th in the NFL in first read target share on third down, converting as many first downs on that all-important third down as Jamar Chase did last year. He is a really good player. The problem is they used him really stupidly. He had 29 receptions behind the line of scrimmage. What are you doing? That's not who JSN is, but Shane Waldron's like, he's really good. I got to figure out how to get him the ball. I know how. Let me just throw it to him behind the line of scrimmage, and hopefully he could do something. He only had 14 routes last year with 2 wide receivers on the field.
That's painful.
Yeah, and now it's like, okay, they did give some money to Tyler Lockett, but Tyler Lockett has not had a great offseason. He's been injured some of the offseason, and the buzz around camp has really been about JSN. I believe this season, JSN will easily be the wide receiver 2 for this team. He is very, very young. We looked at 31 rookies who've had 90-plus targets in their rookie season. And what did they do their sophomore year? 68% increased their target share. The average was 116 targets, and the average yards per route run of all those sophomores is over 2. Those are really, really good metrics that it's like JSN should be utilized in a much better way. He is talented. I didn't watch film and be like, I never thought, yeah, he's just a guy. He's just a dude out there. He doesn't look good at all. And so he's going to have to prove it this season, but I believe he will prove it. And let's just say he goes out and has an average year. If he has an average year, then he will be a relevant fantasy asset for many years to come. He can go out there and fall on his face, and just completely collapse and Jahan Dotson. But if he has even a good season, if he gets 1,000 yards, 1,000 receiving yards, and then Tyler Lockett is basically expired going into the following season, JSN going into year 3 with his draft capital and what the team believed in him when they took him in the first round, I think he will be his arrow is pointing way up to me for next year. It hasn't been this year. This year, that's the thing is, like, the reason his arrow is going to be pointing up next year is because it's so overreacted to. People are acting like he just was a terrible player and has already proven in that 1 year where what was it, his arm he broke?
His wrist.
He started so slow in the season. The first month before the week 5 bye, he was playing like half the snaps anyways with a broken arm. So it's like, cut the guy a little bit of slack, give him a little bit of grace because he didn't suck. He was a good player, and he is a good player, and I think he'll be a top 15 dynasty asset next year because he's very, very young.
I think what a lot of people wanted JSN to be is a first-round rookie that immediately showed out as a Jamar Chase, Jefferson, all these guys. And I think I've kind of tried to figure out, like, where does he fit in? And I think he could end up having a Chris Godwin type role in the NFL.
Yeah.
If he wants to play in the slot, he can also play outside. But Chris Godwin had some monster season. He was a wide receiver, the wide receiver 2 1 year, where he's been peppered with targets, consistent player. Maybe the touchdowns don't always flow, but he has a big guy on the other side, kind of like Mike Evans and DK Metcalf. So it's like that type of career can work for fantasy, except our expectation coming in was this dude needs to ball out. And if he doesn't ball out, then he stinks. And so as a JSN manager in a couple of leagues, I've gotten so many low ball offers from people just saying, oh, well, don't you just want to move on? It's like, no, I think this is a good player. We took him at the 102 last year. Like, I want to stay with this guy.
Yeah, I think you guys...
And you should be receiving low ball offers. I will go out. I hope one of those was from me. I mean, you kick the tires because some people will have drafted him and think he's left for dead and will accept a low ball offer.
Yeah, I think you guys really hit on an important point, which is we've gotten so spoiled, right, with rookie wide receivers when it's like, oh, you're not a superstar after the first year. You know, you can't do it. But it wasn't that long ago that in Dynasty, the rule of thumb with wide receivers was year 3 breakout or year 2 breakout. And we've just gotten so spoiled with these elite wide receivers. I think I've been too hard on JSN early in the offseason. I was kind of one of those guys after the rookie year where I was like,
yeah, you need to apologize.
I'm sorry, Jackson. But I've come around to it. And really what has opened my eyes to the situation is the Shane Waldron situation was so bad last year with how they used him. But also like Tyler Lockett, I think is like 1 foot over the age cliff where it's like, man, he really showed some signs of decline last year. Jason mentioned a little bit of the health stuff this offseason. Like the runway is clear for JSN to have maybe not like a true insane breakout year this year, but like a very good season. And then he is that like classic third year true superstar breakout that we could see coming. So I like this take. I certainly think the area was pointing up. And like we talked about next year, this time we're talking about a player that's going to be drafted way higher in startups than he is right now.
He's 22 and a half years old. So I want to give you guys a couple of names just to kind of gauge where Jason was talking, because whatever startup rankings we have now, things are going to change. And there's guys going ahead of him that it's hard looking at him right now and saying like, oh, they're going to drop beyond him. But like, it wouldn't shock me if next year we're taking JSN over Zay Flowers in a startup.
Right.
What about,
I can see that.
What about Tank Dell? I think I would want Tank Dell now, but it wouldn't shock me.
You can see the path for Tank Dell being the third on the depth chart for his team and yada, yada. It's not going to happen, though. Tank Dell's too good.
Agreed.
What about DJ Moore? We have him at wide receiver 21 in startups, and I feel like he just holds value. He's been doing that for like 7 years? Just young, keep holding value. But a year from now, would you rather have DJ Moore or JSN?
That's a 5-year age gap. So I think part of this is going to come down to Rome Odunze.
Yeah.
If Rome Odunze ends up balling out as a rookie and looks like, oh, maybe DJ Moore going into the following year might be the 2 for his team, that'll make a difference.
I think I still lean DJ Moore, but I wouldn't fault anyone for going the other direction.
Yeah, there's a lot of fluidity in these guys that are wide receiver 15 through 25, which is kind of where we have JSN hanging out right now. So things can definitely change. I will give mine, and it's a little negative. It's always funny when you give negative takes on a podcast. I know Jason on the live show, it was like, am I just ranting here? It's like, I want to give positivity. I want to make sure people understand. So this is a 2-sided thing. The negative side is going to be that Rachaad White is outside the top 24 Dynasty running backs this time next year. So he's about a, running back 15, depending on the side, if you want to go and keep trade cut. So this would be a pretty big drop for him. But the story is that Bucky Irving takes away work from Rachaad White. And Mike and I have been talking on the side, scheming a little bit about Bucky Irving, because I feel like he's not getting any respect. I understand he was a 4th-round pick, but the Buccaneers could have chosen any running back they wanted in the 4th round. In fact, they chose Bucky Irving ahead of some other dudes that I was kind of shocked, like Braylon Allen, Ray Davis, like bigger body backs that could have been direct replacements for Rachaad White. Instead, they take Bucky Irving, who was a pass-catching specialist at Oregon, but I think he's just kind of typecast as a small dude. That's all he is. He's like, oh, he's just Nyheim Hines. Like, he's the same size as James Cook. And James Cook is a player that I think all of us are very bullish going into this year, that we would say, is he ever going to get 25 touches in a game? No. But we look at James Cook as an RB1 for fantasy when they're pretty much the same exact size. Bucky Irving's actually a little heavier than James Cook. But Rachaad White is one of the players that I've been betting on all year, saying this efficiency is not going to hold up. It's just not. When a player was 3.64 yards per carry, when the team was stuffed at or behind the line of scrimmage on 51% of the rush attempts, I mean, it was a bad running game. And it's also the part of Dave Canales that I feel like we don't talk about.
Yeah.
Dave Canales came to the Buccaneers, said he was going to improve the running game, and they improved from 32nd to 32nd. Dave Canales is a great motivator. I hope that he fixes things with Bryce Young. Their run schemes have been terrible, actually. And so I wonder, with a new scheme here, which is what we have to add in for Rachaad White, Liam Cohen, it's going to be more 11 personnel, and you have a running back in Bucky Irving who can take away pass catching work. If you look at players that performed under expectation and saw a ton of volume and finished as top 10 running backs, year to year, they're really good bets to fail. And Rachaad White might be one of those dudes that ends up with 275 touches and punches me in the face.
Like last year.
But I think, like last year, of course, but last year you weren't drafting him or taking him as a top 15 running back in Dynasty at all. Nobody was thinking that. So a year from now, that's my question for you guys. Is Rachaad White a player that you want on your Dynasty roster?
I haven't really ever wanted Rachaad White in Dynasty. So and like you said, he drop kicked us in the face last year because it's like, you can't keep getting away with this. Yet he kept getting away with it just because he stayed alive for the entire season and just compiled touches. And I do think there's a scenario that exists where that happens again, but betting on that back-to-back seasons with two different coordinators, I know it's the same head coach and stuff, but two different coordinators, like eventually NFL coordinators and, guys that make the decisions get fed up with that type of stuff where it's just so inefficient over and over and over again that it does feel like the clock is ticking. That to me, it feels like we just saw the best season for fantasy that Rachaad White will ever have. So certainly I think he loses value. And for that reason, I definitely don't want him, moving into next year, especially if we're not a contender this year.
Yeah, I mean, he's inefficient, but he catches a lot of passes. And, that's the Canales system that, ran poorly but threw the ball well. That helps him in fantasy. Is he going to get a big contract? Probably not. So the arrow's more than likely down. Anytime you get to the year 4 for a running back, the arrow's going to start pointing down a little bit further every single year. I mean, that's just, the age for running backs in the modern NFL.
Do you guys feel like the Buccaneers are a team this year that just across the board, you're like, I just know how the NFL works, and I could be wrong, but I just cannot see them repeating.
Yeah, that's how I feel. I talked about them on yesterday's main show that I think they overachieved last year big time, and personnel-wise, I'm not sure they have what it takes to be as good as they were last year.
Agreed. They were pretty fortunate right on third downs. Is that right, Kyle? That
third downs, turnovers, a lot of stuff that like year to year, it's
there's
just
variance.
not as sticky.
Yeah, I think, and so if they regress in those categories, then certainly they could regress majorly as a win-loss team for sure.
Yeah, and so this bold prediction is not so much that he is just going to all of a sudden suck at football. I think it's more of saying when you look at his value, don't be surprised a year from now if he's a player you're going, same thing we saw with Tony Pollard. Like last year, Tony Pollard was a top 15 running back in startups. And I wasn't certainly saying I thought it was going to work out. And a year later, it's one of those players where you're like, man, is Tony Pollard somebody that you want on your dynasty team or you were trying to actively trade for this offseason? It's like, no. So, yeah. And so really quickly, am I like, because I know I like Bucky Irving, I think, more than you guys in the pre-draft process. You thought he was tiny. You didn't like him, Jason.
I thought he was fine. I think he reminded me a little bit of, not in play style, but like when I remember scouting Devin Singletary and saying, basically, this is a good running back, but he doesn't have the explosive athleticism to be a breakaway star in the NFL. But like in a box, making that first guy miss, he's just really good at that. And I think Bucky Irving is a really good pass catcher and can make that first guy miss. I'm not sure if the athleticism will translate to the NFL to be good enough. So that's just that was my evaluation. I was lukewarm on him. I don't think he's a bad player. I did not watch him and go, there's no way this guy can work, or super overrated. I think he was rated right about where he should have been and drafted right about where he should have been. But that's at a place that is a backup, probably not an exciting fantasy asset, in my opinion.
I do need to admit that I have a soft spot for Oregon players. I always have. I have since I was a kid. I always wanted Oregon players to do well. And if you start to go through historically, Oregon to the NFL, it's like Justin Herbert, and it hasn't worked out too well. Like it's been pretty bad. So let's take a quick break, and we'll be right back. All right, we're back. Betz is going to give us another bold prediction. This one is quite spicy, considering you have someone breaking an all-time record.
Yeah. I mean, the bold prediction was that this player is going to threaten for the record, but I think we should just say he's going to break it.
You're calling it.
Let's just say he breaks it. We all know Garrett Wilson is good. Like, you don't need us to tell you that. You know it. We all know it.
We do?
Kyle doesn't believe it. He also thinks Xavier Worthy is slow. So don't listen to anything Kyle says on this show. But I think Garrett Wilson is a strong contender to at least threaten, if not beat, Michael Thomas's single season receptions record, which is 149 from a couple years ago. Cooper Kupp was there at 145 when he had his insane season. I just think this guy's talent is that good. And when you look at his usage, I mean, 5th among all wide receivers last year in first read target share, 5th in ESPN's open score. So it's like this guy gets open and earns targets like crazy. Yet he just didn't perform well because of Zach Wilson and a bad offensive line and all those things. Now, I'm still not sure Aaron Rodgers is the same quarterback he used to be. It's been a very long time since we've seen him be really, really good, and he missed an entire year of football. But he's better than Zach Wilson, and if they just pepper him with targets over and over and over again, which they're going to do, I think he could just have a legendary season. So we're talking about target competition of Mike Williams coming off a torn ACL, who is changing teams for the first time in his career. Just came back to team drills on Tuesday this week, so it's going to be a little bit for Mike Williams before he's back to 100%. Malachi Corley is reportedly like the wide receiver 5/6 on the depth chart currently. Xavier Gipson, the ghost of Alan Lazard, is on this team. Tyler Conklin's going to see 87 targets, no more, no less. But Garrett Wilson could legitimately see like 180 targets this year or more. I think he's going to be insane this year for fantasy. So my bold prediction, Garrett Wilson, single season receptions record.
Okay.
I almost made a bold prediction of his collapse.
Oh no.
This season, but I saw your prediction in here, so I left it alone. I understand everything you're saying. I mean, there's a reason he's being drafted at, that he's a high second round pick, because he is good. He does get open. He does earn targets, and now his targets should be good coming from, first ballot Hall of Famer and Aaron Rodgers. But also that defense is so good.
True.
They're going to be able to run the ball better this year with their offensive line improvements, and they're not going to just be snapping the ball and throwing it to Garrett Wilson over and over while screaming and backpedaling. And, Aaron Rodgers, I've been kind of a little bit more verbal for a year and a half now. We don't know that he's the same Aaron Rodgers. I just watched, this was accidental, not in preparation for this, but I just watched some film of Aaron Rodgers from a couple years ago in the playoffs, and it was like I did forget 1 year prior to his last season how incredible a pocket maneuverer he is. I mean, he's just moving around, scrambling. He's not rushing, down the field, but he is extending these plays, and that is where a lot of his value came from. You just watch these plays, you're like, wow. And every time I'd see this play, I'd go, wow, he's not doing that. He's not going to be doing that this year. There's no way that he can do that play that he just caused and single-handedly was the reason why the wide receiver had the time and the opportunity. So I do just worry about, and it's the Jets. There's certain franchises, I don't know if it's voodoo dolls or curses, but there's certain franchises that if you want to make bets against them, it's, it's like I'll bet against the Browns every year and come out on top at like an 80% hit rate. So there's silly things like that.
So what if he's really good at earning targets? What if his targets are just never going to be valuable?
Well, they don't have to be. He just has to catch them for the receptions record.
Well, I don't know. He's been getting a lot of them, the most targets through the first 2 years of the NFL. I'm just giving here's what we've had so far. I know that he's going to get a ton of targets this year. I mean, I'm sure we have him down for a 28% target share, something stupid. That's like, this is one of the best in the league. And then I go, where's he going to cap at touchdowns? 6?
No, I think that's not fair. Aaron Rodgers is, I mean, if he is good, then, I mean, his specialty's always been inside that 20. He throws an incredible touchdown rate. So I think the touchdowns are the reason why, if you're comparing him to Chris Olave or something like that, it's like the touchdowns, you should be able to argue that the Jets might be better with Brees and Aaron Rodgers and have enough touchdowns. I did want to check, though. I have him down for a 29% target share.
Okay.
Which would be incredible for your bold prediction. However, I do think because of the great Jets defense, I don't see them pushing the pace of play and throwing as much as they did last year. So that is a total of, even though 29% target share, fewer targets than last year, 162 for me.
Okay, so he's going to catch basically every single one. He'll come out 150 catches on 162 targets and break the record. So it's going to be all fine.
Easy peasy. All right, I have a much more difficult bold prediction. I think maybe even a spicier bold prediction, because right now we talk about how things change in the flow and the season. This guy's getting hyped and is higher than he should be, and this guy's getting bad publicity or a bad thing comes out, and everyone's off of a player. And so Jonathan Brooks will start the season on the IR, and next season he will be drafted in Dynasty startups ahead of Travis Etienne and Kyron Williams next year. He will be, which pretty much puts him at like a top 10 startup running back. And I believe that will happen almost, not entirely, but almost regardless of how he does this season as a rookie. I mean, he's coming off of the ACL that he had in college. So he was drafted knowing he was injured. And I will say that, that when he was drafted, it was reported, they think he'll be ready for training camp or he'll be ready for, the start of the year. And he's not. That's obviously not good news. But it also genuinely could be really good news. And what I mean by that, from a dynasty perspective, is you see players that rush back quickly. Javonte Williams comes to mind last year. He was young, and he had a bad knee injury, and he shocked the world. He was back before anyone thought he could be. And you know what? I feel like looking back, I'm like, man, maybe you should have given that guy more time to recover and fully heal and come back at full strength, because it seems like he never got back to the player he was. Same with Chris Godwin, who came back so early from the timeline that you thought he was going to happen, and it just always feels like he lost a step after that injury. So I like when a team is in this position. This is not a team that appears to be a playoff contender in the Carolina Panthers right now. So why rush him back? Let him start on the pup. Give his body an entire time to heal. I think at the end of this season, if he has 4 good weeks, I mean, that's it. I expect him to have more than that. He'll be playing in week 4. But if at the end of the season, the last month of the year, he gets hot and he is that Canales receiving back, and all of a sudden he's getting 4 or 5 catches a game at the end of the season, and you see the juice. He was the first running back drafted this year in the NFL draft. And if he shows those flashes as a 21-year-old, next year he's going to be an incredibly highly drafted asset. You've got Travis Etienne, who'll be going into, he'll be playing at 26 years old. Kyron will be on the last year of a deal at 25 with Blake Corum behind him. Chuba Hubbard is maybe a great pick right this second in redraft, but dynasty-wise, Jonathan Brooks is set up to take over this team next year as a young man, highly drafted, highly talented. And so I do think that he'll, midway through this year, or at month 2 into this season, when Jonathan Brooks has only been on the field for a couple of weeks and is probably still a significant backup to Chuba Hubbard, I will be trying to trade for him in every Dynasty league I can, because we overreact to what's happening right this minute. And if what's happening right that minute is that he looks like he's a backup and he's not the guy and we've forgotten, then I'll scoop him up and wait until the next year you go, oh, he's a 22-year-old who's now taking over as the starter for this team.
Wasn't it, I could be remembering this wrong, but wasn't Cam Akers, like he had a hot streak the final month or so of a season, and he was so young, and the next year it was like, this is the dude, and he was like a first-round pick in redraft leagues.
Yeah, that happened, and
then he got injured.
Yeah, and you also, and I don't want to compare the player Jonathan Brooks directly to Todd Gurley. Todd Gurley was a better prospect coming out of college. But you also saw in the rookie, I'll compare the injury situation where Todd Gurley was coming off the ACL and didn't start the season. I think he missed his first 3 games and was a little bit slow of a start. And then Todd Gurley, I think he finished as like the running back 7 at the end of the year because he's really, really good back. And obviously that was a better situation, a better prospect than Jonathan Brooks in the Carolina Panthers. But like, this isn't an unknown injury. This isn't like, he was the first running back drafted with this ACL, same as Todd Gurley. So situationally, I think that it pays to remember. And then I think that following year, I don't know if Todd Gurley was the number 1 Dynasty startup running back, but he couldn't have been far behind that.
Yeah, I think you laid it out perfectly. It's like, and we've had this conversation a little bit about Brooks, just in thinking about forecasting him as a year 2 player. It's like, it almost doesn't even matter what he does this year. Like,
right.
The list of guys we have like in the rankings right now, it's like, Kyron, Saquon, Travis Etienne, these guys, like, I think most of them are going to fall at least a little bit. There's not that many running backs in Dynasty that, like, no matter what, this guy is gaining value next year. Jonathan Brooks is that guy, guaranteed. So, I know that
Miles Sanders will be gone.
Yeah.
Chuba Hubbard is an unrestricted free agent. So it's like, this is just his team next year.
For sure. And I think they're, like you said, playing it really smartly, where it's like, we're not winning the Super Bowl this year. Like, we don't need to give Jonathan Brooks 20 touches in week 4. Doesn't matter. Let's get him healthy. Let's let him acclimate to the NFL. Let's get his feet wet, and then in November, December, really cut him loose is kind of what I would expect to see this year. But even if that doesn't happen, let's say his knee is sore, or he has a hamstring injury when he ramps up, or whatever. It's like, it doesn't matter. Like, Jonathan Brooks is the dude for this team next year, guaranteed.
Yeah, if you're in a startup right now, I'm assuming he's a player that's going to slide just from recent news, and people are like, why would I take this player? I know that he's going to start this way. But yeah, I'm looking at our list, looking at our top 12 running backs. It's like, we expect some veterans to fall. There's some guys that are third-year running backs, Ken Walker, Pacheco, and Cook, who look awesome for this year. But if I'm just going to guess based on odds, one of those dudes is probably going to fail this year, or at least fall down, and Brooks will probably end up being in that top 10. So I think it just makes sense. Also, I was poo-pooing earlier on Rachaad White and Dave Canales, but I mean, come on, Brooks is going to get a ton of targets too. Like, he was a great pass catcher.
The targets are there. I mean, we talk part of the reason why the Buccaneers went from the 32nd ranked running attack to the 32nd ranked running attack is that offensive line was incorrigible. It was a bad news Bears ragtag group. So they have at least. While I don't think Carolina has a great offensive line, they have some really talented players, and if health clicks, you could see it turn around quite a bit.
I've got one more bold prediction for us, and this one I feel like might be out of left field for some people, but it's Isaiah Likely, tight end for the Baltimore Ravens, becomes a top 12 Dynasty tight end next year in startups. Now, you can look at that and go, okay, well, I guess you're projecting Mark Andrews to be injured. I'm going to talk about this as if Mark Andrews doesn't get injured, because I think what this team is going to morph into in 2024 is more 2 tight end looks. They were awesome last year, if you didn't know. Like, Lamar's MVP season, you think of, what he did. He only threw 24 touchdowns, but a ton of them were to the slot, and a ton of them, he was actually number 1 in the league in quarterback rating with 2 or fewer wide receivers on the field. And Isaiah Likely's been one of those guys that I feel like has been the most consistent pass catcher that's been talked up in preseason and training camp from the Ravens this year. Like, they've been talking over and over again, we got to get this guy on the field. We know the contingency plan if Andrews is out, right? Like, we understand if Andrews is out, Isaiah Likely is a top 6, 7 weekly tight end.
I think down the stretch last year when Andrews missed, he was the tight end 3. So yeah, it's definitely in the range of outcomes.
Yeah, over the last 2 seasons, 9 games without Mark Andrews, he's averaged 50 yards and 5 targets, which is just incredible, especially in Dynasty, to find as your tight end 2 or 3 just sitting on your bench. I mean,
last offseason, one of my favorite transactions I've made in a while, because I'm the Mark Andrews manager in our league, is I sent a second rounder for Isaiah Likely just to lock that spot up. If you are the Mark Andrews manager, go get Isaiah Likely right now.
Yeah, I think that he's one of those players that are just not going to be able to keep off the field, because you can think about 11 personnel with that offense and go, okay, now who's their wide receiver 2? And then you start to go further, like who's their wide receiver 3? And it's a bunch of dudes that I think at the end of the day, we're saying we're going to be running wind sprints. Like this is
Bateman's year, man. This is the time.
Bateman,
it's finally going to happen.
Nelson Aguilar,
Devontae Walker,
the boys
that basically their job is to line up on the outside and just get out of the way. I mean, Aguilar's going to have like 4 or 5 touchdowns just because he lucks into them. But last year, okay, they had 2 or fewer wide receivers on the field on just 28% of their dropbacks, but it accounted for 39% of their passing yardage. In other words, it was the biggest discrepancy in all of football, where their dropbacks were small, but their yardage was huge. And Lamar was great. They also have a ton of shot plays when they have 2 tight ends on the field and Likely can get down the field. So I expect them to have more 12 personnel. I also recognize this is me saying this is what I would rationally do with this roster, because I just think they don't have the firepower at wide receiver outside of Zay Flowers to really be a great offense. Like they're short on a couple of players. I think Isaiah Likely can be that guy. So I think there's upside if Andrews goes down, but even if Andrews doesn't go down, I could see him finishing this year as a top 10 to 12 guy. And if Andrews struggles with injuries, people are going to want to buy in and say, this guy can take over for this team. And he's entering year 3 this year. So I'm a big fan. Maybe I'm a bit too bullish. Is top 12 too much for a guy who is the tight end 2 on his own team?
I don't think so.
12's not hard. I mean,
yeah, that's true.
It is tough when you look at startup, though.
Yeah. Okay. Well, you're saying number 12 season. You're saying the number 12 drafted. That is very, very difficult for where he is, barring a real catastrophic injury to Mark Andrews. I think what would have to happen for him to be drafted as a top 12 guy the following season, the only path for that is that Andrews is healthy, is that Andrews and this becomes a Gronk Hernandez type of system where both tight ends are valuable game in and game out. And you've seen enough flashes and there is enough need for pass catchers that Isaiah Likely's been a thing for this team for a while. They haven't known exactly how to get him out there because they have Mark Andrews. But with an entire offseason and what they saw down the stretch last year, I would not be surprised if they are completely prepared to deploy him as a primary receiving target this year.
The other thing, too, with Likely is, like, even if it doesn't pan out perfectly this year, let's say Mark Andrews stays healthy all year and Likely has some good games, but he doesn't really have this true breakout profile. It's like you've already seen enough in his career, and you're going to see enough this year that, yes, he has one more year after the season on his contract in Baltimore, but this guy screams like classic, true second contract breakout top 5 dynasty tight end eventually. So if you can get him now for like a second and just sit on it and know that if Andrews is out, you got a top 6 guy, but in 2 years, like, you're probably going to have a top 5 guy no matter what, assuming he lands a deal as the starter somewhere or they move on from Mark Andrews or whatever. He's just talented, and I think we've seen it. I mean, he's proven that. So I like this take, and getting him now before it's too late, I think, is a really, really savvy move.
Yeah, he's only 24 years old, and I think that second contract, there's going to be a team out there. Let's say it's not the Ravens. There's going to be a team that's saying, like, that guy killed us. I want him as a weapon on our team. And, I'm looking at some of the guys like David Njoku, tight end 10 feels stable. Evan Ingram, 11, feels stable. Jake Ferguson, who, stable, but then it's like Cole Kmet, Freiermuth. There's a bunch of guys in this range that I feel like he can leap, and it doesn't have to be an Andrews injury. That's going to do it for this podcast. Next week, guys, we are turning the corner. We're going to be right there in week 1, and every single week, all throughout the year, we'll get to be with you on the Dynasty Podcast. Make sure you go to megalabowl.com, get to compete with us. We'll talk to you again next week.
Thanks for listening to the Fantasy Footballers Dynasty Podcast. If you want to take your Dynasty skills to the next level, check out thefantasyfootballers.com.